Hello and welcome to Center for Victory's podcast of Your Best Day Yet. Here at Center for Victory, we're here to help unlock, reinforce, and enrich relationships through personal and professional development. I'm Eric Guy, Chief Victory Officer, here again with a guest that you might have remember from last month, Miss Marissa Host. Glad to have you back on.
Thank you.
Last time you were on, just so everybody knows if they didn't hear, last time you were on, you and I, because of what you do, asked you to come on and be a guest, hopefully more often as your schedule allows. But we discussed a bit on just ourselves and how they can be affected, what's all around us and how they can be impacted in things. And we were discussing some of the research out there on this, but specifically getting into one of my favorite books, which in front of you have a more recent copy. Mine is actually, you can see it's faded. I've had this. This is one of the first books I really got into. Love it. Got notes all around things, but it's The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. But before we get started, if you could just remind people of your background, because I think it's very important about them understanding that, because obviously we do a lot on leadership, we do a lot for companies, we do a lot for people, but a big thing here is the physical and mental piece that I think you bring from your background. So go ahead and just kind of real briefly remind people of your background, please.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me again. So my background, I've been a nurse for about a decade, specifically honed in on geriatrics, dementia care, Alzheimer's, and hospice, which I have a passion for. And so really treating that holistic person at the end of life, dealing with a population that often goes overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just become passionate about looking into these things, about regulating my own life and really honestly trying to make my end of life as good as it can be, as weird as that sounds. But and I've just seen a lot of patients that have had good deaths, bad deaths, and I've just looked into what causes each of those things. So,
yeah. And so when we first started talking, we got really excited about this, because usually if I start bringing these kinds of things up, people go, it's not good dinner talk. But
No,
I remember the first time we were at dinner with your husband and my wife, it was like, oh, wow, like she's read some of the books that I have. This is going to be cool. We started talking. I'm like, wow, this is going to be great, because I think people need to know this, but I also believe they want to know it. They just don't know where to get it. So why I asked Marissa to continue to be a guest is for my passion for health and finding better answers to focus on our health and not sickness. So I thought we'd dive more into the discussion today regarding the environment and how it can possibly impact our cellular and gene expression that could ultimately lead to better health, performance, and relationships. So we're actually going to call this podcast, It's the Environment Stupid. All right. And why I say that? Well, it's actually the chapter in his book, but it kind of sticks out because it's like, yeah, like there's a lot of things in our environment that affect us. One of the things that he mentioned in his book, I guess maybe more in my words, is that when you provide a healthy environment for yourselves, they thrive.
Absolutely.
And he might have actually said those words, but the opposite is true. And you said this, and this goes to your experience. Like deep down, I think most folks understand it, but we don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
So that we'll get to that kind of healthy environment kind of in a second. But from your experience, here's where I want to kind of tee in on you. What would an unhealthy environment look like? Like, what have you witnessed?
Oh my!
I mean, you don't have to give us everything, but like, what was things that really stood out to you?
I've been in a lot of homes.
Yeah.
And homes are a good representation of people's overall environment. It's where they live. There are some pretty negative environments out there. You can almost imagine it with me walking in. It's a beautiful day outside. The shades are drawn, curtains closed, news blaring in the background. Just sitting in the quiet, you almost get depressed
Yeah.
walking in. You have family member, I was working in hospice at this time or other home care as well. It doesn't necessarily just have to be the end of life, but family members bickering, just if for someone who tries to live in a healthy environment, you walk into that and it's almost too much.
Yeah.
You can't, it clashes with who you are. And so, yes, those people are that they're very difficult to work with because their environment reflects also their heart a lot of times and who they are. Very closed, very cluttered. A lot of hoarders are in this situation. And so a lot of negative environments out there.
Okay. You said hoarders.
Mm.
Do you, do you mean like physical hoarders or?
In this case, I mean physical hoarders.
Okay.
Yes. A lot of, I mean, you just walking through their home and it's just like closed. You feel like you need to duck, even though the ceilings are high. So just a very closed environment. They live in their own box. It's dark. It's cold, not in the temperature sense.
Yeah.
And you can almost feel it when you walk in there.
No, did they just have a lot of stuff too?
Oh,
Just tons of clutter.
yes. And I don't know the science behind hoarding. I've not looked into it, but it definitely coincides often with a very closed environment, a very negative
Yeah.
environment, dark, dreary almost, and just very negative feeling in that home.
Yeah, I've been into quite a few, and yeah, it's one of the things that I'm going in even to work with families and working with kids is one of the things that I will instruct the parents on is like, you know, they can't even move. Like you got to get rid of some of this
You
stuff.
do. Yeah.
Right? And then it's just tons and tons and
Mhm.
tons of stuff. There's research out there that says we work better when our environment's clean.
I
But
really think it reflects our heart and our brain.
yeah,
I really think the clutter in our house often reflects that.
yeah. So you said physical hoarders.
Mhm.
Um, I've often seen what I would call emotional hoarders. I
Mm.
don't know if you know what I mean by that, but they you have family members around in situations like yours that hold back. They don't
Mm.
they hoard those emotions,
Oh,
the
yes.
good, and they don't, they're too
Yes.
consumed about some other things here and there. Um, what do you think would make a good environment? So you've obviously been in some toxic ones. You said you've been in some good ones. What does a good one look like? Like think about your best one. What
Mm.
happened? And speak to the one of, if you can, one of the end of life ones,
Sure. Yeah.
because we just experienced that with our family and it was fantastic. It was amazing
Yeah.
actually to be part of that
Mhm.
because I married into
Mhm.
that side and knew her well, but I'll talk to that in a bit. But give us an example of what that looked like.
Very different. Very different to the negative home that you walk into. So again, you almost have to visualize it with me. I remember walking in, and this has happened many times. But one in particular, you walk in, the windows are open, the blind, and I know that seems silly. It's not. You walk in, the blinds are open, the windows are open, there's sunlight. They're often connected to nature. They either have plants in their home or they garden and I'm talking end of life patients. You can just feel the positivity in their voice, in their family's voice. They're very open. They're very vulnerable in a good way. There's a back and forth there where it's easy to get to their heart where I'm trying to get to say, okay, what do you want this to look like? What do you want
Yeah.
your end of life to look like? Whereas the negative, you can't get through. So that kind of impedes my job to to make their end of life great. And honestly, there are good and bad deaths, and their environment is a huge, huge reflector of how it's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
So this bright, open, positive environment surrounded by people that they love, it's it's typically a very, very good experience at the end of life. And we call it a good death.
Yeah.
They have a good death. They don't suffer. They're loved. They know they're loved. They're loving. And it's just a wonderful experience.
What are their, we talked about the physical hoarding, but the emotional side of things especially when people are at, end of life, I know what that looks like when it's really good. Think about a family, describe that for somebody in the difference.
I would say the emotional hoarders, they have a lot of bitterness, unforgiveness. I mean, they're literally holding
Yeah.
on to these things. And that often can lengthen someone's end of life. They're just these nuances that you
Yeah.
learn. They're holding on to something and they're holding on to their life as well. They don't feel satisfied with what they've done. They don't feel satisfied in their relationships. So they cling on to this world. I don't know why. Um, I don't know, but the people who are more open, who have a loving family, who are vulnerable, again, they have that flow with their loved ones. There's no unforgiveness.
Mhm.
There's love. Again, it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and the stark difference. It's shocking, the stark difference. But yes, that emotional hoarding, unforgiveness, bitterness, hatred, just general negativity.
Yeah. And I don't want to just focus on end of life, but I think the comparison there of just because that started at some point, like you
Sure.
just didn't get to there,
Oh, right.
right? And like, oh, everybody's like this, right? It started way back. And why I like the contrast of the stories that you give is because, when you look at things, most people aren't intentional about their environment. A lot of
Sure.
people, it's hard to, you say you're passionate about working in hospice. You don't hear that very often
Mhm.
because it can like zap you.
I'm sure.
When I first started my career, I worked with extremely difficult uh, teenage boys,
Mhm.
and they were the worst of the worst. And I could see people just in the environment. They just got they came in, they meant well, and within 6 to 12 months,
Mhm. The high turnover.
they're out the door, and then you're wondering, well, if they can't take it,
Mhm.
how do we expect these kids to get
Mhm.
treatment? Like
Yes.
it's crazy.
Yep.
Um, but like as I said, uh, my wife and I, Tammy, we just went through that uh, with one of her aunts. It was amazing.
Mhm.
It was beautiful. I know,
It sounds odd to people who haven't experienced it,
yeah.
but it is beautiful.
Um, and she was just ready,
Mhm.
but that was intentional all her life.
Mhm.
Um, I'm very close to her family, like her kids and her grandkids, and she had great
Mhm.
grandkids, and you know it, it wasn't doom and gloom like
Mhm.
when you say like
Mhm.
they positioned her where she could see out her big window
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
her living room, put chairs all around so people could sit, be with her,
Mhm.
so she could have a view
Yep.
of the bird feeders that she put there years and years and years ago.
Mhm.
Now she was 94. Um, and she just still had a lot of sass.
Yeah.
And she was just so at peace, but she made everybody else there too. Like I
Mhm.
remember just sitting there, like I got a cramp because I was sitting next to her bed and kind of leaning this way and holding her hand, and she
Mhm.
fell asleep holding my hand, and I couldn't like.
Oh, no.
But I just, at first I was like, "Oh, I got to get it out," and I was just like, let it be there, and I just felt peaceful,
Mhm.
right, and it felt good to be around, tell stories,
Mhm.
um, and it ended well. She lived life well,
Mhm.
but it's also the environment that she left.
Exactly. Mhm. And that will carry on.
Yeah,
That will carry they will see this interaction. And again, like you said, it didn't start from this. It's not like, oh, they all made amends, which it would be fantastic.
yeah,
This has probably been her demeanor most of her life,
yeah.
and that will carry on to her children, grandchildren, and so on.
It-
It's beautiful.
yeah. I mean, it could have been a lot worse. I mean, she raised. I'm gonna get this. I think I'm gonna get this right. Three, 3 or 4. We're missing.
You better get it right.
Yeah,
Same,
yeah.
same.
No. So uh, she raised 3 kids on her own. Her husband died.
Mhm.
First husband died. Second husband died. Her second husband died while I was around, and she still, it's been years since he passed, but he was a wonderful gem too, but she was amazing. I mean, just what
Mhm.
she did. And yeah, when you think about that, right? Didn't mean to be that morbid, but again, to distinguish the two sides here, like I think people need to be more intentional about
Yes.
their environment. It
Mhm.
is like the title says, it's the environment, stupid.
It's a lot.
There's a lot you can do. And
Mhm.
you and I, Will and Tammy, we've had these discussions,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because we had these discussions before you're first born.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
what does that look like? What kind of things do you want to do?
Mhm.
Like, just from your experience, what have you changed? Because,
Mhm.
sometimes we have to change our
Oh, yeah.
conditioning
Mhm.
from the environments we grew up in so we don't repeat. You didn't want to do that.
Correct. Yes. Yes. Correct.
I mean, what do you recommend to people? And I mean, I could go on and on and on, and I'm really excited about this, but you know, what are some things like, and they're not profound. So before,
Right.
as people are listening to this, these aren't
They're simple.
huge, profound things, but
Mhm.
they're little things to be intentional about. What are some of those things?
I think the first for us, and I think you recommended this, was relationships. Being very intentional about your relationships. Sometimes that means removing some, and sometimes that means welcoming in others.
Hmm.
Um, that one was huge. You talk about your inner circle.
Yeah.
We're very intentional about our inner circle now, whereas we were not before.
Okay.
So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Um,
And what have you done with that? So I'm not trying to
no, please.
get you off topic
Yeah.
here, but like, what did that mean to you? I mean, I think I say that a lot of times, that people go, oh yeah, 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 and then don't pay it mind.
I think I think removing negative influences for me
Hmm.
was most revelatory and difficult, honestly,
Yeah.
but we're better for it. And a lot of those things, we talk about family and things that are passed on. A lot of those things were intentional in cutting those possible things being passed on to my
Yeah.
daughter now. I was very intentional about keeping people at a distance, at a safe distance. Of course, you love them.
Hmm.
You love them, you're kind, and you still have a relationship, but you have to really be specific and choosy on who you allow into your heart, into your dreams, your goals, all of those things. And sometimes people don't understand your family, where you're going. And so it's just best to kind of keep them at a distance, I think.
Yeah. I think this is one of the reasons, in my opinion, again, I don't have research to back this up, but I think this is a big reason people don't like the holidays, especially like
Oh,
Thanksgiving, because you feel it.
oh, mhm.
But this is also the reason people want to get together,
Yes.
is
Right.
because the environment's different. It's like it
Yes.
it pulls you towards that. Like
Mhm.
what we talking about the cells last time you were on is just, when you have that toxic cell, everything else gets toxic. I think that's why people try to avoid things like
Mhm.
Thanksgiving, the holidays,
Yes.
just to get togethers in general. But on the other hand, I think that's also why people look forward to those things.
That's a really good point. I never considered that actually. Yeah, you're drawn, you want that connection. We are all starving for this connection, but when you get a bunch of people who are closed off to themselves, there's no relation there.
Hmm.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a shame to think that just something like that. And this is not, and can I just clarify on that relationship piece? It's an unconditional
Oh,
relationship.
mhm,
Right? It's not conditional. It's not, oh, you have to do this, or act a certain way when you come over or while you're around me.
mhm,
It's like you get to be who you are,
mhm,
right? And, some people go, oh, there's, somebody's just going to walk all over you. No, like,
mhm,
because you have that and
mhm.
you're thriving,
Yeah.
you're offering them the
Mhm.
space to thrive.
Absolutely.
Um, what are some other things in your environment?
I think it's important to again keep that open environment. And Will, my husband, and I are very intentional about not having clutter
Mhm.
to the point where people think we're crazy. But I think an environment, I said it, I think the environment reflects often your heart
Yeah.
and what's in your head. And I just can't. That all of those knickknacks, all of those things in your house that are cluttering, or all of those things in your life, they're taking energy.
Hmm.
They all take energy. I'd rather divert my energy to the things that are important: my marriage, my daughter, my
Hmm.
work, relationships. I personally can't thrive if I'm surrounded by a bunch of clutter. So that's something we did to be intentional about our space and our environment. Plants, life, being connected to nature more. That's important to us. Being in the grass. Yeah, I
Hmm.
know that seems silly, but I mentioned like these little old ladies that I've treated, they garden or they have the windows open. They're out in the country in the middle of nowhere walking barefoot in the grass, and they're the healthiest people I know. It's not about economics.
Yeah.
They're not wealthy. I mean, obviously you can if you're wealthy, but these people, it doesn't take money. It takes just intentionality. They're in the grass. That's simple, but it's very profound as well. So being very intentional about your actual house environment, cleanliness and things like that.
So let's think about more about that, because I think those are some things that people can really take away. You mentioned plants.
Mhm.
I'm obviously big on music,
Mhm. Oh, yes. Yes.
good music, not destructive
Yes. Yep.
music.
That's huge these days.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's just amazing. It just sets the tone
Mhm.
for everything.
Mhm.
And, uh, to think about that. And, we did this when our kids were very young, and you have a young daughter now. I just think that's what's going in.
Yep.
Like, they
Downloading.
don't know the words.
Mhm.
Yeah. But, she's downloading. Um, I've always been a big proponent on not, you mentioned with the toxic environments that you've seen, just, the news playing, and I'm not, doesn't matter
I
what channel it is. It's just
exactly.
that environment is constant, right?
Mhm.
You get those, those Fox of CNN, the
Mhm.
MSNBC junkies that just perseverate on all that negativity. And, then people make the argument, well, you need to be informed, but you don't need
Mhm.
to be inundated,
Exactly.
right? And I don't
Exactly.
even think you need to be that
I
informed.
don't think you need to be that informed.
It's like,
Maybe that's unwise, but I
and
don't think so.
yeah, and that was actually a rule for our kids when they were growing up. No news,
Wow.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's great.
and they knew, and I would test them every once in a while. I'd flick it on, and they would rat me out. Mom, he's watching. So, um, plants, lighting,
Mm,
you know, another reason to get
yes.
outside. Like,
Sunlight, which directly affects your sleep. You need vitamin
right?
D to create melatonin, which so many of us take or have taken
Yeah,
to go to sleep every night. Just get outside. Your children need sunlight,
yeah,
especially. Yes, just get outside, fresh air.
and get the skin exposed. People are freaking
Yes.
out about, like,
Don't wear sunscreen all the time,
yeah,
everyone, please. No, I mean, that's an unpopular
yeah,
opinion.
it
But
is.
yeah, get some exposure.
Yeah. Um, bringing nature in. I love having plants. I love, just getting out, just walking around. Like I said this morning, I just took a walk around here. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm very, very fortunate. I mean, we're just
Mhm.
surrounded by trees.
Yes.
Um, so that's easy.
Mhm.
But being intentional about that. I mean, yeah, I guess that's one good thing I learned from generations past. And
Mhm.
my grandfather,
Mhm.
as soon as he, at least what I saw, every time he was done with dinner, he would immediately get up and take a walk,
I love that.
and he would walk his property.
Mhm.
And again, here's somebody who uh, lived a very long life,
Mhm.
and lived it well.
Sure.
Like, to your point, I
Yes.
mean, this guy. I remember when they called us down for hospice. I went down to visit him. I thought it was going to be the last visit. He ended up 2 more years,
Amazing.
because he just
Yeah.
like, I want to be home,
It
and he
happens.
felt better at home.
Yes.
And I remember my father called me a week or two later, and he's like, "Well, he's out mowing the grass." Wow,
Yeah,
he
it
was just
happens.
in
It
hospice.
happens.
Um, but nature, clutter, lighting, surroundings, being intentional, work.
Mm. Yes.
Nowadays with all the competitiveness of work
Very, yeah.
environments, I just don't understand why people go to negative environments to work.
Mhm. There are options.
There are a lot of options.
I hopped a couple jobs
Yeah,
to get to the one I ended up with. I loved it.
yeah,
Loved it.
and there are a lot of good leaders and people out there looking for good people.
Mhm.
Like, I think people just get too scared and not,
Sure.
but that's probably another podcast.
Yeah, that's another
But,
podcast.
and then lastly, maybe one other thing is speak to thoughts. So if you
Oof.
could be more
Oh, wow.
intentional,
That could be a whole other podcast.
yeah,
Your thoughts. I mean, the external environment is so, so important. Your
yeah,
internal environment is, it all is combined. So, positive thinking, clearing your mind at times, getting rid of any anxieties that you're dealing with. And this is all, it's all one ball, it's together. It all interacts with each other. So, yes, maintaining positive thoughts. You mentioned that your grandmother lost her, you said her two husbands. Yes.
that no, that was my wife saying, yeah,
Okay. Yes.
yeah,
She could have gone super negative. She
right.
lost two husbands, but instead she chose to still maintain a positive environment, her external. And I would have guessed that her
And
internal environment as well,
yeah,
very
and
regulated.
she was just a ray of sunshine. I mean, just, I mean, anybody that knew her would describe her as beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, and she was so fun to be around. And yeah, it was amazing just to be in her presence.
Hmm.
Right.
I would say she probably had a good handle on her thought life,
Yeah.
maintained a positive outlook on things, even when they weren't positive.
Hmm.
I've got a grandmother who do that as well. They're very influential in my life. They, no matter what's going on, things are positive. We're looking ahead. We're expecting a positive outcome,
Hmm.
and it's that will trickle down in generations to come
Yeah.
because of their positive thinking, their positive outlook on life. Um, that's changed my life, and it will change my daughter's life as well.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, let's cut it there. And when we come back, maybe we can get, I know, get more into the some other things here as we talk about, especially as relationships go. So let's
Mhm.
hold that one off for another podcast. But thanks again for being on. Hope you enjoyed this. Everyone that's listening, watching. Um, if you have some questions or need more information, you could visit us at centerforvictory.com. That's our website. And remember, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, make this your best day yet. We'll see you soon.